Captain Lee Tae-min stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching stars drift past the main screen. Space looked peaceful from here, but he knew better. In the 43 years since humans joined the Galactic Confederation, they had learned that the galaxy was full of dangers. Most aliens still called Earth a death world, and humans primitives. But Lee Tae-min didn't care what they thought. The Indomitable was a human ship, built tough like everything else from Earth. While other species made their ships pretty and comfortable, humans built theirs to survive. The ship had thick armor, backup systems for the backup systems, and weapons that could punch through almost anything. Lee Tae-min was proud of his ship and his crew. "Captain," called Lieutenant Kim Jae-ho from his station. "I'm getting something strange on the communications array." Lee Tae-min walked over to Kim Jae-ho's station. The young officer had been with the ship for 3 years, and he was good at his job. If Kim Jae-ho said something was strange, it probably was. "What kind of strange?" Lee Tae-min asked. "It's a distress signal, but it's old. Really old. The computer says it's been traveling through space for almost 300 years. Kim Jae-ho frowned at his screen. "And the language? I've never seen anything like it." Dr. Park So-young looked up from her science station. She was the ship's expert on alien life and languages. Her job was to study new species and help humans understand them. "Can you send it to my station? I'd like to take a look." Lee Tae-min nodded. "Do it. Dr. Park, see what you can figure out." As the signal transferred to her computer, Dr. Park So-young put on her headphones and started working. The bridge became quiet except for the soft hum of the ship's engines. Lee Tae-min watched her work, knowing that her skills had saved them before. After an hour, Dr. Park So-young took off her headphones and turned to face the captain. Her face was pale, and her hands were shaking slightly. "Captain, this is bad. Really bad." She took a deep breath. "The signal is from a species I've never seen before. They call themselves Zephyrians. The message is broken, but I can understand parts of it." "What does it say?" Lee Tae-min asked. "They're talking about something called the Devourers, or the Swarm. They say it destroyed their worlds and ate their people. The message gives coordinates to a star system in the Forbidden Zone." Engineer Choi Hee-jin looked up from her station. She was a small woman, but she was the best engineer in the human fleet. "Captain, the Forbidden Zone is marked as dangerous on all our maps. No Confederation ships are allowed to go there." Lee Tae-min thought about this. The Confederation had many rules, and most of them were made by aliens who thought humans were too violent and stupid to make good decisions. But sometimes humans had to make their own choices. "Dr. Park, is there anything else in the message?" he asked. "Yes, sir. They say they're the last survivors of their race. They're hiding somewhere in that star system, and they're asking for help." Dr. Park So-young's voice was quiet. "Captain, if this message is 300 years old, they might still be alive. Their species might live longer than humans." Lee Tae-min walked to the front of the bridge and stared at the stars. He thought about the rules and what the Confederation would say. Then he thought about people who might be trapped and alone in space for 300 years, waiting for someone to hear their call for help. "Kim Jae-ho, plot a course for those coordinates," he said. "Sir?" Kim Jae-ho looked surprised. "But the Forbidden Zone—" "I heard you. Plot the course." "Captain," Dr. Park So-young said softly, "Confederation Command will be angry. We could get in serious trouble." Lee Tae-min turned to look at his crew. These were good people, and they trusted him to make the right choices. He had never let them down before. Sometimes doing the right thing gets you in trouble, he said. If there are survivors out there, we're going to find them. That's what humans do. The trip to the Forbidden Zone took 2 days. As they got closer to the coordinates, the crew became nervous. Space looked different here. There were fewer stars, and the ones they could see seemed dimmer. Long-range sensors showed strange readings, but nothing they could identify. "Captain," Kim Jae-ho called out, his voice tight with worry. "You need to see this." The main screen changed to show what was ahead of them. Lee Taemin felt his blood turn cold. Floating in space were the remains of hundreds of ships. They were not human ships or any design he recognized. The ships were huge, much bigger than anything humans had ever built, but they were all dead, empty shells drifting in the darkness. "My God," whispered Dr. Park So-young. "What happened here?" Engineer Choi Hye-jin ran scans on the dead ships. "Captain, these ships are from different species. I count at least 20 different designs. Some of them are really old, maybe thousands of years. But they're all dead," Kim Jae-ho added. "No power, no life signs, nothing. It's like something sucked the life right out of them." Lee Taemin stared at the graveyard of ships. Each one represented a species, a civilization, maybe billions of lives. All of them were gone now, leaving only empty metal tombs floating in space. "Keep scanning," he ordered. "Look for anything that might still be alive." They moved slowly through the graveyard, scanning each dead ship they passed. Some were so old they were falling apart. Others looked like they had been attacked, with holes burned through their hulls. But all of them were empty. "Captain!" Kim Jae-ho's voice was sharp with alarm. "I've got movement on long-range sensors. Something big heading this way." "How big?" Lee Taemin asked. "Bigger than a space station. And it's moving fast." The bridge became silent except for the beeping of the sensors. Everyone stared at the screen, watching as something massive approached them through the graveyard of dead ships. "Captain," Engineer Choi Hye-jin said quietly, "should we run?" Lee Taemin thought about the 300-year-old distress signal, and the survivors who might still be waiting for help. He thought about all the dead ships around them and what might have killed them. "No," he said. "We came here to find survivors. Let's see what's out there." The massive object grew larger on their screens, and Lee Taemin hoped he had made the right choice. The massive object came closer, and the crew of the Indomitable held their breath. On the main screen, they could see it was not a ship, but a space station. It was huge, bigger than anything humans had ever built, but it looked old and damaged. Parts of it were dark, and other parts flickered with weak lights. "It's not attacking," said Lieutenant Kim Jae-ho, sounding relieved. "No weapons detected," added Engineer Choi Hye-jin. "Actually, I'm not sure how it's still working. Power levels are almost zero." Captain Lee Tae-min studied the station carefully. It was clearly alien, with a design unlike anything in Confederation space. The metal looked strange, almost like crystal, and it seemed to glow softly even in the darkness. "Dr. Park, are you getting any signals from that station?" he asked. Dr. Park So-young worked at her station, adjusting the communication systems. After a few minutes, she looked up with excitement. "Captain, I'm getting a weak signal. It's the same language as the distress call. Someone is trying to talk to us." "Put it through," Lee Taemin ordered. The speaker crackled with static, and then a voice came through. It sounded old and tired, speaking in the alien language they had heard in the distress signal. "Dr. Park, can you understand what they're saying?" Lee Taemin asked. "I think so," They're asking who we are and where we come from. They want to know if we're—" She paused, working on the translation. "If we're the ones who answered their call. Tell them we're humans from Earth, and yes, we heard their message." Dr. Park So-young spoke into her communicator in the alien language. Her pronunciation was not perfect, but she had learned quickly. After a few exchanges, she turned back to the captain. "They want us to dock with their station. They say they have information we need to hear." Lee Taman thought about this. Docking with an unknown alien station was dangerous, but these people had been waiting for 300 years for someone to answer their call. "Tell them we'll dock, but we're bringing weapons and medical supplies." The docking process was difficult, because the alien station's systems were so old and damaged. Engineer Choi Hee-jin had to manually adjust their ship's systems to match the station's docking port. It took 2 hours, but finally they connected. "Life support is working in the docking area," reported Kim Jae-ho. "Air is breathable for humans." Lee Tae-min selected a small team to go aboard the station. He took Dr. Park So-young for communication, Dr. Yoon Ji-hai for medical help, and Lieutenant Kim Jae-ho for security. They put on their environmental suits and carried medical supplies and translation equipment. The airlock opened, and they stepped onto the alien station. The gravity was lighter than Earth normal, and the air smelled strange, like ozone and something sweet. The corridors were wide and tall, clearly built for beings larger than humans. They followed the directions given by the station's inhabitants and soon found themselves in a large chamber. What they saw there made them stop in shock. 17 beings stood waiting for them. They were tall, almost 3 meters high, and their bodies seemed to be made of living crystal. They glowed softly with internal light, but the glow was dim and flickering. It was clear that these creatures were very old and very tired. One of them stepped forward and spoke in their musical language. Dr. Park So-young listened carefully and then translated. "He says his name is High Curator Veltar. He is the leader of the last survivors of the Zephyrian race." Lee Tae-min removed his helmet and bowed respectfully. "Tell him we are honored to meet him, and we're sorry it took so long for someone to answer their call." As Dr. Park So-young translated, Veltar's crystal body flickered more brightly for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried deep sadness. "He's thanking us for coming," Dr. Park So-young said. "But he says we may have made a terrible mistake by coming here." "What does he mean?" Lee Tae-min asked. Veltar began to speak, and Dr. Park So-young translated as he told their story. 300 years ago, the Zephyrians had controlled a vast empire with hundreds of worlds and billions of people. They were an old race, peaceful and wise, with technology far beyond what most species possessed. Then the swarm came. He calls them the swarm or the devourers, Dr. Park So-young explained. "They're not like any species anyone has ever seen. They don't just conquer worlds, they consume them. They eat everything, the people, the knowledge, the culture, even the memories." Veltar continued his story, and Dr. Park So-young's face grew pale as she translated. "The swarm is like a hive mind, but worse. When they consume a species, they don't just kill them. They absorb their knowledge and abilities. They learn how that species thinks, how they fight, how they build things. Then they use that knowledge to attack the next species." Another Zephyrian stepped forward. This one was different. Part of his crystal body was cracked and dark, and he moved with difficulty. Veltar introduced him as Warrior Prime Kethmo, their military leader. Kethmo says they fought the swarm for 70 years. Dr. Park So-young translated. They used every weapon they had, every strategy they could think of. But the swarm kept learning and adapting. Every time the Zephyrians found a way to hurt them, the swarm figured out how to defend against it. Dr. Yoon-ji Hai stepped forward with her medical scanner. "May I check his injuries?" she asked. After Dr. Park So-young translated, Kethmo allowed the human doctor to examine him. Dr. Yoon-ji Hai's scanner showed massive internal damage from some kind of energy weapon. This happened during the last battle for their homeworld. Dr. Park So-young continued translating. The swarm consumed their entire civilization. These 17 survivors escaped in this station and have been hiding here ever since. Lee Taemin felt a chill run down his spine. "Ask them about the ship graveyard outside. Are those all species that fought the swarm?" When Dr. Park So-young asked, all 17 Zephyrians dimmed with sadness. Veltar spoke for a long time, naming species that had been consumed by the swarm over the centuries. 47 different species, Dr. Park So-young said quietly. All consumed by the swarm. Their ships are out there because this was supposed to be a final meeting place where all the species would make their last stand together. "What happened to that plan?" Lee Tae-min asked. "The swarm found them first. It consumed each species' knowledge of the meeting place and got here before they could organize their defense." Engineer Choi Hye-jin, who had been quiet until now, asked, "Where is the swarm now?" Veltar's crystal body flickered rapidly as he spoke, clearly upset. "He says the swarm has been growing," Dr. Park So-young translated. "For 300 years, it has been consuming species in the dark regions beyond known space. It's gotten much larger and much smarter." "How much larger?" Lee Tae-min asked, though he was afraid of the answer. "The Zephyrians have been monitoring space with their sensors. They estimate the swarm has consumed at least 200 more species since the Zephyrians fell." Lieutenant Kim Jae-ho stepped forward. "Captain, we need to warn the Confederation." But Veltar was speaking again, more urgently now. "He says it's too late for warnings," Dr. Park So-young said, her voice shaking. "The swarm is already moving toward Confederation space. Based on their calculations, the first scout ships will reach the outer colonies in a matter of weeks." The chamber fell silent except for the soft humming of the station's struggling life support systems. Lee Tae-min felt the weight of what they had learned. An enemy that had consumed hundreds of species was heading toward the inhabited galaxy, and no one knew it was coming. "Ask him," Lee Tae-min said slowly, "if anyone has ever successfully fought the swarm and won." When Dr. Park So-young translated the question, all 17 Zephyrians became completely still. Finally, Veltar spoke a single word. "No." "Dr. Park," So-young whispered, "no one has ever beaten them." Suddenly, alarms began sounding on the station. Lieutenant Kim Jae-ho's communicator crackled to life with a message from the Indomitable. "Captain, this is the bridge. Long-range sensors are detecting multiple objects approaching our position. They're moving fast, and they're big." Lee Tae-min looked at the Zephyrian survivors, then at his crew. The swarm had found them. The alarms on the Zephyrian station grew louder. Captain Lee Tae-min spoke quickly into his communicator. "How many ships and how long until they reach us?" The voice from the Indomitable was tense. "3 ships, Captain. They're smaller than the station, but they're moving faster than anything we've ever seen. They'll be here in less than 6 hours." High Curator Veltar spoke urgently to Dr. Park So-young. She listened and then turned pale. He says those are swarm scout ships. Once they find us, they'll call the main fleet. We have maybe one day before hundreds of swarm ships arrive. Lieutenant Kim Jae-ho checked his weapon. Captain, we should leave now. Get back to Confederation space and warn everyone. But Lee Tae-min was thinking differently. He had spent his whole life learning that sometimes you had to fight when running was the smart thing to do. It was a human way of thinking that most aliens didn't understand. Dr. Park, ask Veltar about these scout ships. How big are they? How many crew? After a quick conversation, Dr. Park So-young replied, he says each scout ship has about 50 swarm units aboard. They're heavily armed but not as protected as the main fleet ships. Perfect, Lee Tae-min said. His crew stared at him in shock. Captain, Dr. Yoon Ji-hai said carefully, you're not thinking of attacking them, are you? That's exactly what I'm thinking. Warrior Prime Kethmo stepped forward and spoke rapidly. Dr. Park So-young translated, he says that's suicide. No one has ever successfully attacked a swarm ship. They learn too fast and adapt too quickly. Lee Tae-min smiled grimly. That's because no one has tried the human way. He turned to his crew. Kim Jae-ho, get back to the ship and prepare for combat, but not the kind of combat they're expecting. Choi Hee-jin, I need you to modify our weapon systems. Dr. Park, you stay here with Dr. Yoon and keep working with the Zephyrians. I want to know everything about how the swarm thinks. As his crew prepared to leave, Veltar spoke again. Dr. Park So-young looked surprised as she translated. He wants to know why you're not running. He says humans are supposed to be smart enough to know when they're beaten. Lee Tae-min looked at the tall crystal being. Tell him that's where he's wrong about humans. We're too stupid to know when we're beaten. And sometimes, that's exactly what you need. Back on the Indomitable, the crew worked frantically to prepare for battle. Engineer Choi Hee-jin was in the weapons bay, making modifications that would have horrified any Confederation. Engineer, what exactly are you doing? Asked Sergeant Nam Ki-woo, the ship's Marine commander. I'm making our weapons unpredictable, Choi Hee-jin replied, rewiring control systems. The swarm learns from patterns, so I'm making sure our weapons don't have any patterns. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Kim Jae-ho studied the approaching swarm ships on his sensors. They moved in perfect formation, each ship exactly the same distance from the others. Their course was mathematically precise and their speed was constant. They're so organized, he muttered. Too organized. Captain Lee Tae-min returned to the bridge and studied the tactical display. The swarm ships would arrive in 4 hours. Most captains would use that time to run or prepare defenses. Lee Tae-min had a different plan. Kim Jae-ho, I want you to take us into that asteroid field, he ordered, pointing to a cluster of rocks near the station. Sir, that's dangerous. The asteroids are moving unpredictably, and some of them are the size of buildings. Exactly as the Indomitable moved into the asteroid field, Lee Tae-min explained his plan. The swarm expects logical behavior. They expect us to either run or fight them in open space. They don't expect us to hide in a place that might kill us just as easily as they would. The ship shook as they navigated between massive floating rocks. Engineer Choi Hye-jin had to constantly adjust their course to avoid collisions. It was dangerous and chaotic, exactly what Lee Tae-min wanted. Captain, called Dr. Park So-young. From the Zephyrian station, Veltar says the swarm ships have arrived at the edge of the graveyard. They're scanning the area. Good. Let them scan. For 2 hours, the swarm ships moved through the dead fleet, examining each empty vessel. Their scans were thorough and methodical, just as Lee Tae-min had expected. The swarm was looking for patterns, for logical hiding places, for predictable behavior. They didn't expect to find a human ship deliberately hiding in the most dangerous place possible. "They're getting closer to the asteroid field," reported Kim Jae-ho. "Wait for it," Lee Tae-min said calmly. When the first swarm ship entered the asteroid field, it moved cautiously, using its sensors to map a safe path. That was its mistake. "Now!" Lee Tae-min ordered. The Indomitable came out from behind a large asteroid, moving fast and firing everything it had. But thanks to Choi Hye-jin's modifications, the weapons fired in completely random patterns. Some shots missed on purpose, others hit different parts of the swarm ship, and the timing was chaotic. The swarm ship tried to adapt to the attack pattern, but there was no pattern to adapt to. Its defenses, designed to learn and counter organized attacks, were useless against pure chaos. "Direct hit!" shouted Kim Jae-ho. "Their shields are down!" "Marines, prepare for boarding," Lee Tae-min ordered. This was the part that would shock the galaxy later. While the swarm ship was still trying to figure out the human attack pattern, the Indomitable rammed into its side. The impact would have destroyed most ships, but human vessels were built to survive the worst space could throw at them. Sergeant Nam Ki-woo led 20 Marines through the breach in the swarm ship's hull. What they found inside was unlike anything they had ever seen. The ship was alive, its walls pulsing like the inside of a giant organism. Strange creatures that looked like insects mixed with machines moved through the corridors. But Nam Ki-woo and his Marines had trained for boarding actions their whole lives. They moved through the ship like a virus, destroying everything they found. When the swarm creatures tried to adapt to their tactics, the Marines changed their approach. They used tricks learned from Earth's deadliest environments, fighting in ways that no civilized species would ever think of. Within an hour, the swarm ship was theirs. The other two swarm ships tried to help their companion, but Lee Tae-min had anticipated this. As they moved to attack, the Indomitable used the captured swarm ship as a shield. The swarm ships couldn't fire on their own vessel without destroying the knowledge it contained. "They're retreating," reported Kim Jae-ho with amazement. "No," Lee Tae-min corrected. "They're regrouping. They'll be back with more ships." On the captured swarm vessel, Dr. Park So-young and the Zephyrian survivors examined the alien technology. What they found changed everything they thought they knew about the enemy. "Captain," Dr. Park So-young called excitedly, "you need to see this. The swarm's computer contains information about every species they've ever consumed. But there's something strange." "What kind of strange?" "Every species they fought used the same basic tactics. Organized formations, logical strategies, predictable responses. They all fought the way civilized people are supposed to fight." Veltar spoke to her, and she nodded before continuing. "The Zephyrians are right. The swarm's greatest strength is learning from their enemies. But that's also their weakness." "How is it a weakness?" "Because they've never fought anyone like humans before. Every species they've absorbed came from peaceful worlds with stable environments. They evolved to cooperate and think logically." Lee Tae-min was beginning to understand. "But humans evolved on Earth." "Exactly. Earth is a death world. Humans evolved under constant threat from predators, natural disasters, diseases, and climate. Changes that would have killed any other species. You didn't evolve to be logical and peaceful. You evolved to survive chaos." Engineer Choi Hye-jin's voice came over the communicator. "Captain, I'm analyzing their technology. It's designed to counter organized attacks, but our chaotic approach overloaded their systems. They literally couldn't process what we were doing. Dr. Yoon Ji-hai added her own discovery. Their biology is fascinating but limited. They're perfectly adapted to absorb knowledge from species that think in orderly patterns. But human thinking is too chaotic for them to properly absorb. On the Zephyrian station, Warrior Prime Kethmos spoke excitedly. Dr. Park So-young translated, "He says this is the first time in 300 years that anyone has successfully attacked a swarm ship. He wants to know how you knew it would work." Lee Taemin thought about his answer. "We didn't know it would work, that's the point. The swarm expects logical planning and calculated risks. Humans don't always work that way. Sometimes we do things because they're right, even when they're stupid." As if to prove his point, long-range sensors detected a massive fleet of swarm, ships heading their way. Any logical species would have taken their victory and run to warn others. Instead, Lee Tae-min made a decision that would define humanity's role in the galaxy. "We're not running," he announced. "We're going to capture another ship." Admiral Han Seok-jin stood in the command center of Confederation Defense Headquarters, staring at the emergency message from Captain Lee Tae-min. The report was incredible and terrifying, but Han Seok-jin knew Lee Tae-min well. The captain was not the kind of man who would lie about something this serious. "Sir," said his aide, "the Confederation Council wants to see you immediately. They're not happy about the Indomitable going into the Forbidden Zone." Han Seok-jin sighed. Politics were always complicated, but right now, the galaxy faced a threat that could destroy everything. He gathered the data from Lee Tae-min's report and headed to the council chambers. The Galactic Confederation. Council met in a massive chamber on the neutral world of Centauri Prime. Representatives from 43 different species sat in a circle, each group looking very different from the others. Some were tall and thin, others short and wide. Some breathed air, others required special environments. At the center of the circle sat Counselor Thys, a reptilian being from one of the oldest civilizations in the galaxy. Thys had never liked humans, and his opinion had not improved over the years. "Admiral Han," Thys said in his cold voice, "we understand one of your ships has violated Confederation law by entering the Forbidden Zone. This is unacceptable behavior from the newest members of our organization." Han Seok-jin activated the holographic display and showed the council the data from the Indomitable. Images of the ship graveyard appeared, along with recordings of the Zephyrian survivors and the captured swarm vessel. "Honored counselors," Han Seok-jin began, "this is not about breaking rules. This is about a threat to every living being in the galaxy." He explained everything: the 300-year-old distress signal, the Zephyrian survivors, and the approaching swarm fleet. He showed them the data about the 47 consumed species and the swarm's plan to attack Confederation space. When he finished, the council chamber was silent for a long moment. Then Counselor Thys began to laugh. "Admiral, do you really expect us to believe this story? A mysterious enemy that no one has ever seen? Ancient survivors hiding in space? This sounds like something from a human entertainment program." Other council members nodded in agreement. Counselor Vexhai, whose species had been in space for 10,000 years, spoke up. "The humans have always been violent and paranoid. This is clearly an attempt to justify military expansion. You're asking us to panic because of some old radio signals and empty ships?" added Counselor Zilneth. "Perhaps the humans should spend less time in dangerous areas and more time learning civilized behavior." Han Seok-jin felt his anger rising, but he kept his voice calm. "Honored counselors, Captain Lee Tae-min's crew captured a swarm vessel. We have physical proof of this threat." A vessel that no one but humans has examined, Theiss replied. How convenient that only the Deathworlders found this terrible enemy. The debate continued for hours, but the result was predictable. The Confederation Council voted to ignore the warning. They ordered the Indomitable to return to Earth immediately for a court-martial. Any human military movement outside Earth's solar system was forbidden until further notice. As Han Seok-jin left the council chambers, he was approached by a small group of representatives. These were from the younger species, civilizations that had joined the Confederation more recently. "Admiral," said Ambassador Lim Yunseo, the human diplomatic representative, "some of us believe your report. What can we do?" "Not much," Han Seok-jin replied bitterly. "The old species control the council, and they think they know everything." 3 days later, the first reports came in. A mining colony at the edge of Confederation space had gone silent. Then a research station stopped responding to communications. By the end of the week, 3 entire star systems had gone dark. Han Seok-jin requested another emergency council session, but Councillor Theiss dismissed the reports. "Space is dangerous," Theiss said calmly. "Equipment fails, accidents happen. There is no evidence of this imaginary swarm." But Han Seok-jin was no longer listening to the council. He sent a secret message to Earth to President Kim Min-jun of the Korean sector. The message was short. "The old ones won't listen. Time for the young ones to act." President Kim Min-jun had been waiting for this message. He called an emergency meeting of the Earth Defense Council, bringing together military leaders from every nation on Earth. When they gathered in the secure conference room beneath Seoul, Kim Min-jun showed them the same data Han Seok-jin had presented to the Confederation Council. "The alien governments refuse to take this threat seriously," Kim Min-jun said. "But we've seen the evidence. The swarm is real, and it's coming." General Park Dong-hyun of Earth's combined military forces studied the tactical data. "If these reports are accurate, we have maybe 2 months before the swarm reaches the core worlds of the Confederation. What are our options?" asked President Kim Min-jun. "We can follow Confederation orders and stay home while the galaxy burns," replied Admiral Oh Soo-jin, commander of Earth's Space Fleet. "Or we can do what humans do best, which is fight when no one else will." The decision was made that night. Operation Broken Chain would mobilize every human military asset without Confederation approval. It was technically an act of rebellion, but Earth's leaders had decided that saving the galaxy was more important than following rules. Across human space, the mobilization began. Fleet Admiral Oh Soo-jin took command of over 200 human ships, the largest fleet Earth had ever assembled. Captain Bae Jun-ho's stealth vessels began moving toward the Forbidden Zone to gather intelligence. Dr. Jang Hoon-seok, Earth's leading weapons scientist, started working on new technologies based on the captured swarm data. Meanwhile, on the Zephyrian station, Captain Lee Tae-min continued his own preparations. The 17 Zephyrian survivors had agreed to share their most advanced technology with the humans. It was a desperate gamble, but Veltar had decided that humans were the galaxy's only hope. "Your species thinks differently than any we have ever encountered," Veltar explained through Dr. Park So-young's translation. "Perhaps that difference is what we need." Working together, humans and Zephyrians began developing new weapons and tactics. Engineer Choi Ha-ye-jin learned to modify Zephyrian energy weapons to work with human chaos-based targeting systems. Dr. Yoon Ji Ha-ye discovered that human medical techniques could help heal the wounded Zephyrians, whose crystal bodies responded. well to Earth-based treatments. Most importantly, Warrior Prime Kethmo began teaching human Marines about swarm biology and tactics. The knowledge he shared would prove crucial in the battles to come. The swarm thinks as one mind, he explained. When you hurt one part, the whole organism learns from the pain. But humans fight as individuals, each thinking differently. This confuses them. As the human fleet prepared for war, the swarm struck again. This time they hit Altair Prime, one of the Confederation's most important worlds. Home to 12 billion beings and the galaxy's largest shipyards, Altair Prime was supposed to be impregnable. The attack lasted exactly 18 hours. When it was over, Altair Prime was a dead world. Every living thing had been consumed, every piece of technology absorbed. The swarm fleet had grown larger and stronger, incorporating Confederation technology into their own systems. The news reached Earth just as Fleet Admiral Oh Soo-jin's fleet was preparing to depart. In the command briefing, the scale of the disaster became clear. 12 billion people, gone, reported Captain Bae Jun-ho via secure communication. The swarm didn't destroy the planet, they stripped it clean. They took everything, the people, the knowledge, the industrial capacity. How long until they reach the next major world? Asked Oh Soo-jin. Based on their current speed, maybe 2 weeks. But Admiral, they're not just moving randomly. They're heading straight for the Confederation, capital. Oh Soo-jin looked at her fleet commanders. These were good people, professional soldiers who had trained their whole lives to protect Earth. Now they were being asked to protect a galaxy that had rejected their warnings. Any word from the Confederation Council? She asked. Admiral Han. Seok-jin's image appeared on the communication screen. He looked tired and frustrated. They're finally taking the threat seriously, but it's too late. Every Confederation fleet sent to stop the swarm has been consumed within hours. The swarm learns their tactics and turns their own weapons against them. What about evacuation plans? Chaos. Some worlds are trying to evacuate. Others are building defenses, but there's no coordination. The Council can't agree on anything, and panic is spreading faster than their ships can move. Oh Soo-jin made her decision. Then we do this alone. All ships, prepare for departure. We're going to war. As the human fleet left Earth's solar system, President Kim Min-jun broadcast a message to the Confederation Council. It was broadcast on all channels, ensuring that every species in the galaxy would hear it. To the leaders of the Galactic Confederation, Kim Min-jun said, standing in front of the flags of every nation on Earth. You have chosen not to believe our warnings. You have chosen not to prepare for this threat. That is your right as sovereign beings. But we are humans. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day, and we survived by protecting each other. We will not stand by and watch while innocent people die, even if those people think we are too primitive to help them. The swarm fleet approached the Confederation capital world of Prima Centauri like a dark cloud, blotting out the stars. There were over 3,000 ships, each one larger and more powerful than when the swarm had started their campaign. Every world they consumed made them stronger, smarter, and more dangerous. Fleet Admiral Oh Soo-jin watched the enemy approach from the bridge of her flagship, the Soul's Pride. Her fleet of 200 human ships looked tiny compared to the swarm. Armada, but she was not worried about the numbers. Humans had always fought against impossible odds. Admiral, reported Captain Bae Jun-ho from his stealth ship, the swarm is using Confederation technology now. I can see weapons and shields that they took from Altair Prime. any sign of the Confederation Defense Fleet? What's left of it is retreating toward the core worlds. The swarm consumed most of their ships 2 days ago. Oh, Su-Jin nodded grimly. The Confederation's defensive strategy had been exactly what she expected. Organized. Formations, logical tactics, and predictable responses. The swarm had learned from each battle and adapted, turning the galaxy's own military doctrine against them. "All ships, this is Admiral O," she broadcast to her fleet. "You know what we're facing. You know the odds. But you also know why we're here. There are innocent people on Prima Centauri who are going to die unless we stop this thing." She paused, looking at the tactical display. "The swarm expects us to fight like everyone else they've faced. They expect logical strategies and organized attacks. So we're going to do something they can't predict. We're going to fight like humans." The human fleet scattered as it approached the swarm armada. Instead of maintaining formation, each group followed its own plan. Some attacked from above, others from below. Some charged straight in, while others hid in asteroid fields and jumped out at random times. Captain Lee Tae-min, commanding a mixed force of human ships and the repaired Zephyrian station, led the most dangerous mission. They were going directly for the swarm's command ships, the massive vessels that controlled the hive mind. "Remember," he told his crew, "the Zephyrians tried to fight these things with logic and strategy for 70 years. They lost because they fought the way civilized people fight. We're not civilized. We're from Earth." The battle began when Major Lee In-young led the first boarding action against a swarm capital ship. Her Marines used tactics that would have horrified any military academy. They entered through damaged sections, used explosives in enclosed spaces, and fought in ways that risked their own lives to hurt the enemy. The swarm creatures inside the ship tried to adapt to human tactics, but there was nothing to adapt to. When they expected the humans to retreat, the Marines advanced. When they expected logical responses, the humans did something crazy instead. "This is impossible," reported one of the swarm's absorbed voices over their communication system. "These beings do not follow any known pattern of warfare." Engineer Choi Hee-jin had modified every human weapon to work differently every time it fired. The swarm's defensive systems, designed to learn and counter enemy weapons, were useless against guns that changed their behavior randomly. Dr. Jang Hoon-seok's masterpiece was the Chaos Protocol, a computer virus designed specifically to attack the swarm's hive mind. Unlike normal viruses that tried to destroy computer systems, the Chaos Protocol did something worse. It introduced random variables into the swarm's thinking process. "The virus is working," reported Dr. Park So-young from the Zephyrian station. "The swarm ships are starting to move erratically. Their coordination is breaking down." But the human fleet was taking heavy losses. For every swarm ship they destroyed, 3 human vessels were lost. The swarm was learning, adapting to human chaos, even as it struggled to understand it. "Admiral," called Captain Bae Jun-ho, "we can't keep this up much longer. We need to end this now." Oh Su-jin looked at the tactical display. The swarm command ships were heavily protected in the center of their fleet. Getting to them would require a sacrifice that would shock the galaxy. "All ships, this is the Admiral. I'm ordering a final assault on the command cluster. This is not a retreat mission. We're going in, and we're not coming out, across the human fleet." Crews prepared for what they knew would be their last battle. They armed every weapon, charged every shield, and set their engines to maximum power. They were going to hit the swarm with everything humanity had. Captain Lee Tae-min led the charge aboard the Zephyrian station, its ancient weapons combined with human determination. Beside him flew the Soul's Pride and 50 other human ships, all converging on the swarm's heart. The swarm threw everything at them. Energy beams that could melt through planets, weapons that turned matter into energy, defenses that had protected them for millennia. But humans kept coming. When the Soul's Pride lost its shields, Admiral Osu Jin rammed it into a swarm command ship. When Captain Bei Jun-ho's stealth vessel was surrounded, he set off his ship's reactor inside a swarm vessel. When human ships ran out of ammunition, they used their ships as weapons. The turning point came when Captain Lee Tae-min reached the primary swarm command node. The massive ship was the size of a small moon, containing the central intelligence that coordinated the entire swarm fleet. "Veltar," he said to the Zephyrian leader, "your people fought these things for 70 years. Now help us finish them." Together, human marines and the last Zephyrian warriors boarded the command ship. The battle inside was brutal and chaotic, but that was exactly what humans were good at. They fought through living corridors and breathing walls, using weapons that hurt them as much as the enemy. In the command center, they found the swarm's central intelligence, a massive organic computer that contained the absorbed knowledge of hundreds of species. It was beautiful and terrible, pulsing with the combined thoughts of entire civilizations. "It's trying to absorb our knowledge," reported Sergeant Nam Ki-woo, as strange tentacles reached toward the human soldiers. "Let it try," Lee Tae-min replied, and he walked directly into the alien mind. What happened next would be debated by scientists for centuries. The swarm intelligence tried to absorb Lee Tae-min's knowledge, expecting to gain insight into human military tactics and technology. Instead, it got something it had never encountered before: human memory and emotion. For the first time in its existence, the swarm experienced what it felt like to be an individual. It felt Lee Tae-min's love for his crew, his fear of failure, his determination to protect innocent people even at the cost of his own life. It experienced human concepts that had no logical purpose: sacrifice for strangers, fighting against impossible odds, choosing death over surrender. The swarm mind, built on perfect logic and efficient thinking, could not process these emotions. The contradictions and chaos of human thought created feedback loops that spread through the entire hive mind. Across the galaxy, swarm ships began to shut down as their central intelligence collapsed. The perfect unity that had made them unstoppable became their weakness when infected with human individuality. The war was over, but the cost had been enormous. Of the 200 human ships that entered the battle, only 17 survived. Admiral Osu Jin was dead, along with thousands of other brave souls who had sacrificed everything to save a galaxy that had rejected them. Captain Lee Tae-min survived, but he was changed by his contact with the swarm mind. He had felt the memories of all the absorbed species, experienced their final moments, and carried their pain. In the aftermath of the battle, representatives from across the galaxy came to honor the human sacrifice. The Confederation Council, the same beings who had dismissed the human warnings, now begged for forgiveness. "We were wrong," admitted Councillor Thys, his reptilian features showing genuine shame. "We thought ourselves too advanced to learn from a younger species. Our arrogance nearly destroyed us all." But President Kim Min-jun, now speaking for all of humanity, was not interested in apologies. "You can keep your words," he said simply. "We didn't fight for your gratitude. We fought because it was right. The galaxy was restructured in the months. that followed. The Galactic Confederation became the Galactic Defense Alliance, with humanity playing a central role in protecting civilized space. Human military academies were established on dozens of worlds, teaching alien officers how to think like Deathworlders when facing the impossible. The 17 surviving Zephyrians chose to settle on Earth, finding peace among a species that understood loss and the will to survive. Veltar became Earth's first alien citizen, serving as an advisor on xenobiological threats. 5 years after the Swarm War, Captain Lee Tae-min commanded the new Galactic Defense Force from Earth's orbital station. His fleet included ships from 20 different species, all following human tactical doctrines based on chaos, adaptability, and the willingness to sacrifice for others. Dr. Park So-young led the Institute for Xenobiological Threats, monitoring deep space for signs of other dangers. Her early warning systems ensured that the galaxy would never again be caught unprepared. But on a quiet evening, as Lee Tae-min stood on the observation deck watching Earth turn below, Dr. Park So-young brought him troubling news. "Captain, our deep space monitors have detected something at the edge of the galaxy. It's not the swarm, but it's big and it's moving towards civilized space."